welcome back to the Crazy Courage podcast. I'm here with Karla Briones. She is an immigrant entrepreneur, but more than that, I would say she's a serial entrepreneur because I think there's like 10 minutes in her day that she finds free and she thinks, hey, I'm going to start another business. I'm going to add another layer to the excitement. But what's great about all things she does is to make everyone's lives better. She really tries to help people. She works with a lot of nonprofit organizations. She works with Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada, which is a nonprofit that she founded. She runs a couple of pet food stores, and on top of that, she has her own consulting business. Karla, can you please explain to me in more detail what each one of those do?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, first of all, Nick. Super excited to be here. So what do I do? As you mentioned, I wear a lot of hats. I guess at the end of the day, what I do is I'm just in love with business. I love the idea of solving problems. I love the idea of having an issue and figuring out a way to figure it out and then figure out how to make a business out of that. So I guess I'm I'm an entrepreneur by heart. Started my first business when I was 6 years old, thanks to my parents, and then it wasn't until a few years after I graduated from university that I realized that I wanted to pursue that full time. So wear many hats. I'm a builder. I'm a problem solver. And at the end of the day, I just want to leave this world better than I found it through business.
It's awesome. You have a lot of energy, right? That's what it takes for sure.
I always say that I have ADHD in business. I do have ADHD, by the way, but then that kind of gives you the okay, I get it. It's the I tell my friends and my family that I open and close probably about 1,000 business a day. And it's just my mind. Just that's how some people see life through, like, the colors of the rainbow. Artists, they see life through colors. Musicians see life through
Yeah.
musical notes. I see life through business. So how can we solve a problem and create a business out of that?
Wow, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about your consulting business. It's got your name attached to it. Let's start there.
Yeah. So Karla Briones Consulting started about 7 years ago. And it started because I realized that there weren't a lot back then. There was not a lot of help for immigrant entrepreneurs. So I'm an immigrant. I'm originally from Mexico. Came here when I was 18 after graduating from high school. And my parents and I had a pretty hard time. We lived your typical experience, immigrant experience. And when both my parents and I eventually went into business, it was really hard to figure out how to do it on our own. We didn't have a network. We didn't have the credit history. We didn't have all of these things that are sometimes given for granted when you are born in the place where you are starting a business. So my consulting was sort of the answer to that. It was the answer to, again, back 7 years ago, there was not a lot of programs, there was not a lot of help and support specifically targeted to immigrant entrepreneurs. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. It stemmed from when my dad had to sell his business. Well, he didn't have to, he retired. He's a veterinarian doctor, and he decided to sell his practice, and he hired me to help him sell it. And when we were doing the due diligence, we realized that he made a lot of mistakes in setting up all of the legal structure of the business and the accounting and whatnot.
Okay.
That we had to backtrack 13 years worth of accounting. That costs quite a bit, almost put his retirement in jeopardy.
No kidding.
And that's when I'm like, oh my God, I wonder how many other immigrants have gone through the same or have lost their life savings because of a wrong move, because they didn't know they didn't have a network. And at the end of the day, that's how the consulting, started. It's a very personal story, trying to avoid other people going through that struggle that my dad went through when he realized that the mistake that he made because he didn't know what he didn't know, could have probably been avoided had he had somebody by his side. So that's how it started. It started with, again, just an idea or a desire to help others not make the same mistakes. By that point, I had already gained quite a bit of knowledge in the business industry. My network had expanded. So I'm like, well, what is it good for me if I just keep it in my head and don't share it? So the consulting was sort of my answer to that.
And that's a big thing in business is sharing your knowledge, right? Everyone is in it together, right? All the entrepreneurs, they're in the same boat. So it's always best to share your knowledge and just make it a better community overall. And yeah, I love that you're doing that. And yeah, it makes it great that you saw someone that was having a hard time, obviously personal story because it was your father, but you don't want to see anyone else go through that, or certainly avoid potential problems down the road. That's fantastic. Yeah.
One of my first clients, he was a gentleman from India who was moved to Ottawa, and he wanted to open a tutoring franchise. And I know franchises very well because that's actually how I started in business, was through franchises, which is also how a lot of immigrants start into business. So I know the franchise system,
Right.
how franchises work very well. And he was telling me that he was getting a lot of pressure from
Right.
this franchisor to sign on the dotted line. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're getting pressure. Did they send you a disclosure agreement? And he's like, no, they're sending me the franchise agreement right away. And I'm like, no, well, usually you get a disclosure agreement, then you have 30 days to do your due
Yeah.
diligence and to figure out if that's what you want to get into or not. And then you put in your deposit, and then it could be a refundable deposit. And then after you're ready, then you can ask them for a 30 days cool down period. Then you get your franchise agreement, and then you sign it. And he's like, no, they sent me the franchise agreement right away, and they gave me 48 hours to sign it. He was ready to sign it, and it was a $30,000 franchise fee.
Oh,
Yeah, so at the end of the
geez.
day, I'm not going to tell you what to do or not. I mean, obviously, there's reasons why you wanted to contact this tutoring company, but I have a friend who has a tutoring company, not necessarily the same one. And she also owns a franchise, and it's another franchise tutoring company. Why don't I connect you with her? And you talk to her about what her process was, what her due diligence was, what her regular, fees are like, just so that you get to know a little bit more in the same industry, right? Because I can tell you all about the pet store and the pet world, but I don't know much about the tutoring franchise business. So I put him in touch with somebody in my network. And in the end, I got an email from him like a couple of months down the road saying, thank you. Thank you, because I was about to give out $30,000 that, it took me my lifetime to save. And I ended up going with a different company. And now I realize how devastating that would have been for my family. I just introduce him and then let him make that decision at the end of the day. But it's like, when you come to this country and you don't have that network, you don't know anybody that's doing something similarly, it can be daunting again. And that was sort of like my first example when I'm like, yes, this is what I meant to be doing, and this is what I want to keep doing.
That's awesome. Okay, so okay, here's my first question for you. How do people find you? Like most of the time when you're looking for your first client, you're trying to find people who are local or whatever. But for you, your clients are people who are coming to the country or just got to the country. So how do they know that Karla is the one with all the answers?
Well, I mean, I don't have all the answers, but so how do they find me? I'm very active on social.
Okay.
So every country has a different social medium where they use the most. For example,
Okay.
some people from Ukraine, they're in Telegram more than they are in any other social medium. People from Latin
Okay.
America, they're in WhatsApp. In Facebook. Facebook's actually really big in Latin America. Depending on the countries where they're from is the social medium that they're in. So I'm fairly active depending on what kind of demographic I want to reach. I'm active in those social mediums. I'm very active in LinkedIn, which when you're an
Okay.
immigrant, that's the first thing that everybody tells you, especially if you want to find a job, is go on LinkedIn to find a job. But through
Okay.
LinkedIn, that's my personal branding. It's all about immigrant entrepreneurship. And I have my
Right.
website. So even if people Google my website, shows pretty high. When people are looking for open a business in Canada as an immigrant, I show up, or my website shows up. So
Wow.
there's a lot of ways that
That's
people can find
fantastic.
me, but I'm fairly active on social media.
And that must be it. The way that you're active, clearly you've got some good SEO going to make sure that you show up when people are looking for you. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's taken
And now
7 years to
this
build, but
stuff
yeah.
taking 7 years. Yeah, it wasn't overnight, like everything else, right? It wasn't overnight.
Exactly.
Now that the consulting though, this is what led you to found Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada?
So it was almost like a natural progression. When I was doing the consulting, I also created an online program. So I created a online university, if you want to call it, like Immigrant Entrepreneur Academy.
Nice.
Because sometimes I get the same questions over and over and over and over, and it was like,
Sure.
well, how can I create a program that answers all of these questions and takes newcomers through the step-by-step process on how to open a business. So that was sort of my answer to those repetitive questions that I was getting over and over, and the people that weren't able to necessarily afford my one-on-one services. So what I ended up doing eventually was getting in touch with other organizations that needed services such as mine, so other not-for-profits that were creating incubators, accelerators, programs to help all types of different entrepreneurs. So they started contacting me and subcontracting my services. And then eventually started helping all different types of organizations, like underrepresented entrepreneurs, so Black entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and some organizations that also deal with immigrant entrepreneurs. And I love it. I love a great underdog story. I love underrepresented entrepreneurs because they're so gritty, they're so underserved.
Yeah.
But when you provide them with the tools and the resources and the programming, they hit the ground running. It's incredible to see. But then I realized, wait a minute, I'm doing all of this for all of these other organizations, and then I started researching, is there a national immigrant entrepreneur organization? And there wasn't. So if there isn't, then this is probably my opportunity to start one and to formalize what I've been doing privately through my consulting, formalize it through a not-for-profit. And why a not-for-profit? Because I get a lot of business people say, why did you open a not-for-profit? You could have just stayed for profit. And the reason is because it's about impact, right? Not necessarily about making millions or like the seven figures or whatever, like think like my businesses are doing well, but it's more about impact. How can I create something that is going to have an impact bigger than just Ottawa or an impact bigger than just Ontario? Is there an opportunity to create a national organization where eventually I can pool money from governments and create national programs that will have bigger, long-lasting impact that could outlast me, right? So that could keep growing despite me or in spite of me. So that's where I was going, and that's why I ended up opening the not-for-profit organization. Again, it was like a very natural progression, and there was no organization, so I decided to do it. Man, starting a not-for-profit is a completely different can of worms from a for-profit organization. Completely different. So I'm learning a lot. It's very humbling. I'm back in startup mode. It is very, very
Really?
humbling.
That's interesting, but that's so fantastic. And yeah, so you help people coast to coast.
Yeah, well, that's a plan. We're still in like diapers. It's a baby organization. We founded it in March of last year. And the funny thing is that people think, "Oh my God, you're a not-for-profit. You're going to get lots of grants from the government." It doesn't go like that. Because it's kind of like a chicken or an egg scenario where if you're a not-for-profit organization, a lot of the grant proposals and a lot of the funding that is available, you actually have to be in operations for at least 2 years and be able to provide financial proof that for those 2 years you're in good financial standing. But you're like, but if I have no money, how am I going to have good financial standing? So it's like a chicken or egg scenario. So it's not as easy.
Right.
But yeah, so again, do I want to do national programs? Absolutely. Am I at that stage there? No, I'm not. Again, as an only year-old organization, I got denied one funding and I got so upset about it that I'm like, you know what? I am going to find the funding privately. So I fundraised privately. And I was able to fundraise quite a bit that allowed me to launch our first program this summer. And now that the program is going, it's actually fairly successful. It's getting a lot of buzz in the downtown area of Ottawa. And now I have organizations and people from like the province and people from the city saying, what is this? I'm like, you guys denied me.
Well, that's great.
You know,
That's great. It just took like one little spark.
Exactly. That, denial of funding to say I'm going to do it come hell or high water, I'm gonna fundraise and
Yeah,
I'm gonna go back in my startup mode of being gritty and trying to figure it out how to get the money and see. So it's actually really cool because then I'm running this non for profit with a entrepreneurial mindset. So it's like, I don't know, like we're gonna
right.
figure it out, we're gonna find the money and we're gonna do it.
Wow, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I haven't known you very long, but it doesn't seem like things will stand in your way for very long. You like to overcome the obstacle.
I like a good challenge.
I like a good challenge. That's good. They're in the right business for sure. Being a serial entrepreneur like you are, absolutely, you're learning every day, and it's not just little things you're learning. You're overcoming major obstacles. You said funding. That's a big one. The government's not just handing out money on the street corners and free to go, right? It's you have to figure it out, earn it. Like you said, chicken before the egg, and steep learning curve.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about. You just touched on it, but let's talk about the program that you launched this summer.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's called the Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada's Retail Incubator Program. So basically, what it is it's a program. So I've seen a lot of a lot of incubators and a lot of programs for entrepreneurs and how to launch a business where they get to like 50%. Or at least that's what I think. It's like they get 50%, where you get to learn about the theory of opening a business and the business structures, and you register your business, and then don't forget about accounting, and that's where it
Sure.
stops, right? It's like you're
Yeah,
teaching me how to play soccer without a ball, or or just like
yeah, yeah.
drawing the ball in a whiteboard, but you're not giving me the ball to kick it in the field and actually put in practice what you just taught me and score some goals and be a better player.
Right.
So that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I wanted to create a program where it would be very hands-on. So yes, we're going to teach you about the theoretical part and the educational component of entrepreneurship, but you're going to do it. We're going to teach you how to register your business, but guess what? Your homework is to register your business. We're going to teach you all about, opening bank accounts for your business. And guess what? We're going to bring you the bank to this classroom. You're going to open the business bank accounts. So we're going to teach you about accounting. Guess
Wow.
what? We're bringing you the QuickBooks expert, and you're going to open your QuickBooks online, and you're going to create your chart of accounts. And this is how you do a reconciliation. For 2 months, it was the educational component. We chose 21 entrepreneurs from 17 countries from around the world that made Ottawa their home
Wow.
base. And they all it was product based. So I had to limit it to a specific industry. Then got in touch with
Okay.
the Bioware market. And I was ready to buy a shipping container and talk to the Bioware market. And I'm like, hey, would you let me put in a shipping container so that I can have a pop-up location for this program? And they're like, well, that's great timing because we just bought shipping containers. And if you're interested in a
Right.
shipping container, we can rent you one. And I'm like, actually, that's great because it can, be a proof of concept. Entrepreneurs have been, for May and June of 2024, they've been going to class twice a week for those 2 months and to learning all of the different aspects of business. Some of them were early stage, some of them were just an idea, and we've helped them refine it or accelerate it. And then register. Most of them were not registered yet, so all of them are now registered. All of them now have their business model canvas. Everybody knows where they're going. And then after those 2 months, in the shipping container at the Bioware market, they get a 1 week residency each individually, where every week we're basically launching a new business from now until the end of October,
Wow. Cool,
where
cool.
they're actually
Kind of a
applying everything that they've learned. Yeah, because the our market season goes from May till the end of October, so we have that location
yeah.
till then, and it's gotten a lot of buzz. People that live in the area, they get really excited every week because every week is a new business, so they go and check it out just as for
Really
what's the
cool.
new business
Yeah.
of the week. Yeah, and it's been really cool because we're trying to teach entrepreneurs to not just think about creating a small side hustle business. We're trying to instill the idea
Okay.
of, you know what, let's create a business that is scalable. Let's put you in touch with somebody, you have export potential. How can we get you export ready from the very beginning, right? How can we get you thinking like that from the
Yeah.
very beginning? or some people have gotten wholesale deals already with big grocery store chains. So it's actually really cool to see one lady. She's a single mother of 3, and she was doing this kind of on the side, trying to help it, make ends meet. And now it's taking off, and her sales are unreal. Not just from that. So from that week, obviously she killed it that week when she was at the pop-up. But now
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the buzz and the notoriety that she's gotten because of the program, and her hard work as well, she's growing to the point that we're like, okay, now we need to figure out, like, do we need to open a location? Do we need to, let's just try to think creatively, could this potentially be a franchise? Could you be the franchise? And so now, like, all of a sudden, like, thinking big. Let's think big. Let's think big, because all of these businesses were chosen for a reason. So yeah, no, I could talk about this for hours, so you can shut me up whenever you go
Sure.
on, but
Well, it's very
it's
exciting.
something I'm
Very
super
exciting. It
passionate
sounds like a
about.
lot of fun. Yeah, clearly, but it does sound like it's a really neat program. And yeah, well, just clearly the universe was telling you it's a good idea when they already had that container waiting for you. That's
I
fantastic.
know, right?
Well, you've got a lot of stuff going on right now, but let's go back in time. Let's talk about, now you said you were an entrepreneur back when you were 6 years old. That's back in Mexico, right?
And that is.
What were you doing back in Mexico at 6 years old?
Yes. It was actually my parents. So my mom and my dad, they challenged my brothers, and I have 2 older brothers, to have a straight A's for an entire year in school. So to do really well in school,
Okay.
have straight A's. Little did I know that it was sort of their answer to, if they get straight A's, they get scholarship in a private school. I'm very smart at that.
Oh,
We're very competitive in my
smart.
family, right? So they're like, but if you guys get straight A's for an entire year, we're going to take you to Disneyland. A little 6-year-old doesn't want to go to Disneyland, right? So of course we
Sure.
got straight A's, and my parents are like, now we need to deliver. So we grew up. In a family where I never lacked food on the table, but I didn't live in opulence. Let's just put it that way. So my
Okay.
parents were very hardworking. So going to Disneyland was a big deal, like really, really,
I'll
a
bet.
really, really big deal. But then they said, we can drive to Disneyland, because we were in the north of Mexico. We can drive to Disneyland. We can get you in the theme park. But you guys are going to have to come up with your own spending money. So, because money, is not plentiful in my family. So then I asked my parents for the equivalent of like 10, $20, and I asked my dad to take me to the candy store. So I ended up buying a whole bunch of candy and started reselling candy in my schoolyard, and like the
Look
backyard
at
of my
you.
school. And and then I paid him back, and then I reinvested some of my profits into more candy, and then I started doing that over and over. And then it was so big that I was hiring my old classmates, paying them
Whoa, you're hiring
commission.
people.
So I was candy lord, man. I was 6
Oh,
years old. I was grade 1. So I remember
that's
one
impressive.
day the principal calls my parents, and I never gave any problems. I mean, I was only 6. And they called the principal, and my parents were like, what's going on? And they said, the principal's like, Karla needs to shut down her operations. She's just taking way too much business away from the cafeteria lady. And my parents just kind of high-fived under the table. And then they told me that I needed to shut down my operations. But that's when I fell in love with business. And I was always selling something. I was a kid that was always selling something throughout school. So that's how my
Nice.
entrepreneurial journey started.
That's awesome. Okay, now at some point you said after high school your parents decided to come to Canada, right?
Mhm.
Now, well, I always wonder why Canada. I mean, I love it here. Like of all the countries you could go to, you skipping right over the U.S., coming to Canada. You thought it's too warm in Mexico. I want to go to Ottawa. I want to see what bitter cold is like. How does that go?
So it's a great question. So to answer like one question, why Canada, not the US? So I'm from the north of Mexico, so from
Yeah.
a place called Chihuahua, and that's where the
Yeah.
little dog comes from. It
Yep.
borders with Texas. And I grew up in a time, and even that still happens today, but in a time when there was a lot of racism against Mexicans.
Okay.
There were lots of derogative names being told about Mexicans.
Sure,
especially in
sure,
Texas,
sure.
like in the south of the US. So I lived that, unfortunately.
Oh,
It
that's nice.
wasn't an option. It wasn't an option. We never felt welcome. It's not nice to be a Mexican person in the south of the US. There's a lot of a lot of tension. And
Okay.
yeah, so the US was not really an option for us. And in the late 90s, so I came to Canada when it was 1997, and that's when all of the drug cartels and El Chapo and all of the stuff that you watch now on Netflix, that was
Yeah.
my reality. Again, I was in a border town and one of the hottest sections of Mexico where all of the drug smuggling and the drug lords and killings, and it was not a safe place to be
Dangerous.
at that time. It was super dangerous. So
Yeah.
my parents decided that if they wanted to give us a better life, that they needed to change where we lived. So it was
Okay.
a matter of safety, basically, just because of
Okay.
where we were living in the time that we were living in. So why Ottawa? So why not the US?
Yeah.
Because we were never welcome in the US, and again, all of those
Yeah.
like drug lords and drug
Yeah.
wars, it created a lot of tension with Mexicans. And then
Yeah.
we looked a little bit higher into Canada, and my dad was a member of a club, the Rotary Club, back in Mexico.
Okay.
And I remember once, like a couple of years before I immigrated, there was this pianist that came to play, and he was a pianist, and actually he still plays to this day. He's a pianist from Ottawa. And I've never heard of Ottawa
Okay.
ever in my life, right? So, but he came.
No.
So the Rotary Club invited him, like sponsor him to give a concert in Chihuahua, and he was so
Okay.
nice. He was like the nicest. He's still really nice. Jean Desmarais is his name. He was
Okay.
super nice, and my dad created this like bond with him. And he was super young too. And I don't know, my dad, he took a liking of him. And then he started talking about Ottawa. He started showing pictures about Ottawa. My dad's like, "Oh my God, that's so pretty." So then when they were thinking about moving, my dad's like, "Well, why don't we go to Canada?" So anyway, so that's why we came here. We came to Canada. We came to Ottawa because we knew one person. Actually, we were gonna do Toronto. My parents came ahead of us trying to like scout the area, and they scouted Ottawa. And their next
Okay.
stop was gonna be Toronto because I wanted to
Yeah.
go to what was then Ryerson University.
Yes. Yeah.
And my mom ended up breaking her foot on her way up the bus to go the Greyhound. I don't know if you remember Greyhounds.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
going up on the bus and she twisted her ankle and broke her foot. So she had to stay in Ottawa. So they never made it to Toronto when they were scouting to see where we were gonna live. And they're like, all right, it's Ottawa. Ottawa it is. And that's where we
Yeah,
chose Ottawa.
wow, that's such a great story. Yeah, a lot of things came together there to make sure you guys got to Canada and Ottawa. It's great to hear. Hopefully you were welcomed here as opposed to not feeling welcomed in the US. Geez, it's so sad to hear stories like that. But
Yeah, and it was
it's
funny
just so
because
prevalent.
my English was kind of like if you went to French school, if you went to school and you studied
Okay.
French in school, that was my English. That was the equivalent of my English.
Okay.
So I worked really hard on my accent because I decided to go to journalism school. Anyways, that's a different story. We learned to be very ashamed of being Mexicans in the US. Every time, like whenever I would cross the border to do whatever, and then they would ask me where I'm from, I'm from Mexico. And then I could see and I could feel how I was looked down upon. And when I came to Canada, the first year was the same thing. Oh, I'm from Mexico. And everybody would be like, wow, because back then there were not many Mexicans. What? You're from Mexico? I'm like, yes, here we go again. I'm like, yes, I'm from Mexico. It's like, first question everybody would ask me, it's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, right.
What are you doing in Canada? And I'm like, because it's safe. It was really fun. And it was a breath of fresh air for me. All of a sudden going from being considered, not a good person if I'm from Mexico to all of a sudden being this exotic style thing that I am from Mexico.
Oh,
It was really interesting. It was super, super interesting. And I always felt very welcome. People,
good. Good.
Canadians are incredible. The Canadians love Mexico. I was always made to feel very welcome.
Good. Oh, well, that's good. I've always been proud to live here, so I'm happy to hear that people are being
Yeah.
welcomed here. And I know it's not a perfect country by any means, but I'd like to think that treat people well overall.
Yes.
Well,
Oh,
that's
yes.
great. So you guys came to Canada. I know your mom's foot healed at some point. And then what did your parents do when they got here?
Okay. So when I tell you that we lived the typical immigrant experience, we lived the typical immigrant experience. So you have my
Okay.
dad, who is a veterinarian doctor, who had his hospital
Yep.
back home in Mexico, but here he couldn't practice. He couldn't even clean cages. He was either
Ah,
overqualified or underqualified. So he was
yeah.
overqualified to clean cages and underqualified to do veterinary. His
Right.
first job was selling gas contracts from door to door. So that
Okay.
was his first job. My mom's first job was cleaning homes. My mom was
Okay.
a school principal back in Mexico. And here, with an
Really? Wow.
educational background, you would have to start from scratch. The same for my dad. He would have to recertify. Then he moved up the ladder and he was an insurance broker.
Okay.
And my mom ended up being a cashier for Zellers. I don't know if you even remember Zellers. It's
Colors. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so
Colors
my
is
mom
great.
was a
Yeah.
cashier for Zellers for the longest time, and then eventually my dad ended up hitting the books in the library and studying. And again, I'm skipping a lot of things, but then he ended up
Big court. Yeah.
recertifying for his veterinary license. And my mom went back to school to become a lab technician. And then eventually my dad opened
Okay.
his clinic and my mom became the practice manager for my dad's clinic.
Wow. Cool. When your dad was doing the recertification, was he like, this is all the stuff I already know, or it was just a quick refresher for him, or was it
It's fun. No.
different?
So yes and no. So he came with like 20 years experience of having his own hospital,
Right.
and doing things kind
Yeah.
of the way he was taught, right? Like old school, I
Sure.
guess. But then it's funny
Yes, sir.
because when he was in the process of recertifying, his first big break was getting a job as a vet technician at and I'm not going to name the hospital, but at a local hospital, local veterinary hospital. So he was a vet
Okay.
technician there because he wasn't a veterinarian yet. So that was his biggest break. And there he started, having his like coworkers and other veterinarians, and they would be like, wait a minute, you're a veterinarian. It's like, yeah, but I can't work because of blah, blah, blah. So, and they were the ones that were encouraging, you should do your boards. And my dad's like, I don't have the books. Like, I don't have the textbooks that you guys use to do your board examinations. I don't have the notes. I'm trying to figure it out in the library here. Google wasn't a thing back then either. So he was basically on his own. And then that's when the veterinarians were like, don't worry. So all the vets from that clinic, they pulled their textbooks, their notes from university, and they gave them to my dad so that my dad could actually study
Wow.
for the boards. And some things were easy because he specialized in small animal practice, so cats, dogs, and
Okay.
pocket
Yeah.
pets. So that was perfect. But then parts of
So
his
all right.
certification also included, also included large animals, so farm animals, and that was not his
Okay.
specialization. So that's what he had to
Oh,
literally go back to and study for. But it was really funny because he was working the overnight shifts because it was an emergency clinic. And some of my
okay.
dad was really good in orthopedics, bones. So basically putting dogs back together. And sometimes in the overnight shift, the vets would be like, hey, Roberta, we have this case just came. This dog needs a surgery right away. Do you want to scrub with us? And he's like, sure. So he would like just to help as a vet technician. And the veterinarians would like
Yeah.
close the blinds and they'd be like, you do the surgery, teach us. So because my dad came with a completely different technique, right?
Okay.
The way that he did surgery and the stitches and how he would piece the dogs together and put the nails and whatnot. It was completely different on how they were taught here.
Okay.
And so basically he was the surgeon. He was the surgeon in the overnight shift because there were a few younger vets
Okay.
who wanted to learn from him. So, and that was great for him too. And that's why I'm not naming the clinic because they could get in trouble.
Sure.
But
Sure.
he kept his hands wet, right? So that's how he said it. It was like, I need to
Yeah.
keep my
Yeah.
hands wet
In
so that
practice for
when
sure.
I do my
Yeah.
recertification, I can be successful. And he did eventually. It took him 4 tries. and
Wow.
he didn't give up. And fourth one's the charm.
But now, did your parents know a lot of English when they came here?
My dad did. Yeah,
Okay.
my dad was fluent. Yeah,
Okay.
he ended up doing a an internship in a veterinary hospital in Los Angeles, like in California. So his
Yeah.
English was pretty good, and that's actually something that they would say, "Whoa, you're Mexican and you speak English." Seen us on time. So my dad did. My mom knows. She also spoke English. For me, it was like the English that you speak in university and that you have to write when you're in university is completely different from the English day English. So but yeah, they spoke English.
I didn't mean to take away from your story, but
No,
your
it's
whole
okay.
backstory
He
is
has
so
an
compelling.
awesome. Yeah, I
Right?
know.
That's such a great story. Okay, so back to you. So you were here. You were going to university, and then after university, did you start a business right away?
No, so I went to Carleton and I did journalism,
Yeah.
of all things.
Okay.
That was tough, but anyways, I graduated, which is awesome. And then I
Nice.
realized very quickly that I was never going to be the best writer. I was never going to be the best broadcaster because English wasn't my first language, and there were so many more talented kids in my classes. But I realized that I was really good with people. Like I
Okay.
have this ability to connect with people. I have this thing with people and communication. So I ended up doing a postgrad in Toronto for public relations. And then I worked in public relations for 5-6 years. And in that 5 to 6 years, remember I told you my dad was an insurance broker? That was his second job
Yes.
in Canada. He sold me his first insurance when I was 19. I was his first victim.
Cool.
So when I was doing my post grad in public relations and working as a public relations consultant, and I really enjoyed it. I was really good at it. I loved it. I got a dog, but I didn't have the dog. Like I didn't have the money to get the dog. So I ended up cashing my insurance
Okay.
policy, and everybody thought, "You're cashing your insurance policy." And I'm like, "Yes, I want that dog." And I didn't have money in it, but I had that insurance policy that I was paying like $25 every month. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm paying this for. I just want to cash it out and get my puppy. I had the insurance people, like 3 different people telling me, don't do it. You are never going to get this policy ever again. Anyway, so I did. And then I fell in love with my dog. And one day I called my parents and I'm like, all I want to do is open a pet store. And I felt like kind
Nice.
of ashamed because here it is, my parents, after they spent they struggled so much and whatnot, they finally had their veterinary clinic open. All I want to do is like open up my pet store. And I thought that I was going to disappoint them. And then there was silence on the line. And I was like, crap, I disappointed them. And their answer was, so why don't you? So
Wow.
that was the beginning. That was a push that I needed. I'm like, yeah, why don't I? My parents have gone through all of this to be where they are at, to be able to
Yeah.
have their own business, and what's stopping me? Yeah. A year and a half later, I moved back to Ottawa. I had just given birth to my first human kid, and opened up Global Pet Foods. Yeah. For
Wow.
those people that were telling me that I was making the worst decision of my life by cashing my insurance policy to get that dog changed my life. So
That's fantastic.
it
It
was,
sounded like you really wanted it anyway. It wasn't like it was just a whim or whatever. Like you really wanted that. Clearly there was
yeah.
some sort of pull and it led you to where you are today. I always love hearing that one decision led to where I am today. I love those. Now, your entrepreneurial journey hasn't always been smooth, right? There's been some bumps in the road.
Oh yeah, many.
Yeah, many. You've had the pet stores, which is fantastic, and then you had another franchise that you were running for a while.
Yeah. So I opened Global Pet Foods in Canada in 2009, in the middle of a recession, and then I opened Global Pet Foods Hindenburg the following year, 2010, and then in 2013 I opened Freshie. which is kind of crazy, right? Because I'm going from pet food to human food, and everybody was like, "What?" First of all, there's a few bumps in the road initially with global. I was a new mom, as I mentioned. I had just given birth to my son, and I opened the first store, then I opened the second store, and then I had my second kid. So there were a lot of bumps in the road as us navigating motherhood with entrepreneurship. A lot of bumps in the road. And then I think ego drove my decision to open Freshie, because my question or my decision wasn't because I'm passionate about, because, kind of like with the globals, that my reasoning for opening Freshie was how hard can it be, right? And now, years down the road, that was wrong. That was driven purely by ego. How hard can it be? And it was hard. It was really hard. Why? Because it's an industry that I realized very quickly that I wasn't passionate about. And it's really interesting because I get a lot of questions especially from immigrant entrepreneurs or people who are dabbling into wanting to get into entrepreneurship. Like, hey, what's the best business to get into? And I can tell you what businesses make you money, but at the end of the day, the best business to get into is one that you're going to enjoy, or an industry that you're passionate about from experience. Because if you're not passionate about that industry, things are going to be really hard when shit hits the fan. Because trust me, shit's going to hit the fan one day, one way or another. And it's going to be the passion that's going to keep you going. And I think that was a mistake. Number one was making that decision ruined my ego. And mistake number two, it's opening that business without being truly passionate about the food industry and industry. You have to be utterly passionate about that industry, otherwise you're not going to survive. And that's what happened to me. That and the pandemic.
Pandemic doesn't help, right? Anytime, because I think, sorry, you closed it shortly after the pandemic, right?
Yeah, so we were doing quite well, actually. I like a challenge. Whenever I'm like, if I have a challenge in front of me, I am like driven by challenge. It's like my, I don't know, it's like a drug for me. There's something that is not going well. If it's hard, I'm like, there's gotta be a solution, right? So we were like, our sales at Freshman when we were starting were not that great. And then I'm like, there's gotta be a way. There's gotta be a way. So then my strategy became, you know what, how can I maximize the space that I have and the staff that I'm already paying? Let's go really hard with catering. So I started going really hard with catering contracts, and I was being very successful. We grew the business to over $1 million. Like, the business was doing quite well for the short amount of time that it had been open, but the strategy was always catering, right? And it was a great strategy until COVID hit. Because when COVID hit, all of our catering contracts came to a halt. I think literally overnight we lost 90% of our sales.
Yeah, I felt so bad for anyone in the food industry, certainly entrepreneurs, the restaurant owners. It was so hard for those guys just to, like, I know a lot of other industries got hit hard as well, but I got to see it kind of firsthand through people that I was having conversations with regularly, that they'd fill up their freezers and their fridges on Thursday to get the big orders in for the weekend. And Friday, that's when Doug Ford decides to shut all the restaurants. It's just that was so heartbreaking to hear, because that food's just gone. Yes, you lose the revenue, so no question. But on top of that, you were ramping up for a busy weekend, and now that's just gone. And like the catering contract's gone. It's not like you can just start that up again. You can't be like, okay, you guys can open again. Oh, no problem. We'll just open again. You got to get the staff. You got to get the food. If you're doing catering, like, the catering doesn't just magically come back, right? It's a huge thing. You have to build up again over time. You can stop it cold, but to restart it again.
Yeah, and it was funny because for us, our biggest clients, like the clients that I went really hard at, was hospitals and schools. So the two industries that took the longest time to kind of open up and relax their rules and whatnot, it's like Gosh, I'm like, it was a good strategy before COVID. I mean, I had schools up the yin yang,
Yeah.
and all of the hospitals were ordering their catering through us. So it was amazing. But then I didn't realize that COVID was going to be around the corner. So eventually,
Well, I mean,
um,
how could you?
we ended up actually iterating. Like we ended up creating a grocery store, groceries where people didn't want to
Okay.
go to the grocery store. Supply chain became really hard. I don't know if you remember, it was hard to find stuff
Yes.
because people were
Oh,
like
absolutely.
buying toilet paper and buying all of this thing like the world was going to
Yeah.
end. So
Toilet paper.
I did not have supply chain issues with my supplier. So my supply chain was very, very healthy. So for a time I'm like,
Wow.
okay, so people are having supply chain issues, I don't. So I'm going to create a grocery store. So that's what I did. We ended up creating grocery boxes that we would deliver to our customers. We basically created a grocery store online like overnight because I had access to produce, I had access to canned foods, I had access to anything in my supply chain. So then I created a grocery store,
Wow.
and then people were starting to say, "Oh my God, the poor frontline workers," and then these guys are heroes, and I'm like, yes. So I created a campaign of like, let's feed the frontline workers. You know, you've $10. You know, you buy a meal for a frontline worker, and that actually was awesome. That was our saving grace for a while as well. We were selling,
Yeah.
so people would basically, through our app, they would basically buy frontline workers lunches. And I think at the end of the day, we distributed over 5,000 meals to frontline workers through that
Wow.
program,
Wow. That's
which
huge.
was a win.
Huge.
It was a win-win-win, right? So the customer felt good that
Yeah.
they were doing something. It kept my business open and it kept the frontline workers fed. I have a picture. I took it because it's a really cool picture where right in the thick of things when they were trying to figure out ventilators, the respirator ventilators that they were
Yes.
in high
Yeah.
demand, and they didn't have enough ventilators and people were dying because they couldn't have access to those ventilators. There's a picture that
Yeah.
a respirologist from the Civic Hospital sent me. And it's a respirologist. There's a freshly wrap, like branding right there, with like different pieces of like hoses and breathing like hosing respirator and like an instruction
Okay.
manual, and the caption read, trying to figure out how to bring to life this respirator from the 80s, the 1980s. Thank God for my
Oh,
freshie wrap that was given to me because I've been here for
wow.
over 12-hour shifts. And to me, I was like,
Jeez.
yes, that's
Amazing.
awesome.
Oh,
That's
amazing.
amazing. Doing something good despite the
Yeah.
whole situation, and seeing like firsthand from somebody who's trying to revive a 1980s respirator so that they can save somebody's life, and how that meal is actually bringing fuel to their very long day. So to me, that was sort of like okay, okay, it's good. It's good. It's good. I'm good. This is but then
You're
after
doing
a
good.
while,
Clearly. Clearly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so after a while, then everybody started doing the frontline worker meals. And then at the end of the day, a year and a half later, I ran out of steam. And that's why I say passion is so important, because I ran out of steam, and my passion, I didn't have 2 drops of passion left, like at all. And it was to
Oh,
the point where I was like, you know what? It's not worth it. I didn't
no.
file for bankruptcy or anything. It was just a business decision. I'm like, you know what? It was also health, because I was so stressed. I had two, kind of like a pre-heart attack, basically. I
Oh,
had to be
okay.
rushed to the hospital twice. Yeah, I was on heart medication just because of the stress. And then
Whoa.
I was like, I'm
Wow.
still young and I have young kids. Is this business really worth it? Is my health, worth it? Like, try to put everything in like a scale and say, okay, where are my priorities? And at the end of the day, I realized
Yeah.
I think I should just like pull the plug on this business that is not bringing me joy. It's not bringing me money. It's not bringing me satisfaction, fulfillment, and also the franchise store sold the business to a new owner. And then there were
Okay.
also other things involved there that the whole change was not worth it for me to stay in that business. So I decided I'm just gonna count my losses. Business decision. Ouch! It hurt because it was a very expensive
Yeah.
decision. But at the end of the day, what do I value more? And as
Yeah,
soon as I
right.
got rid of that business, then all of these other opportunities started materializing. So the non-for-profit and like
Oh, yeah,
on my consult, like all of a sudden I gave space to more stuff that I am truly passionate about. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's also something that I learned is that
right.
there are a lot of programs that help you how to start a business. It's because the starting a business and growing a business is
Yep.
sexy, but there is nothing available that tells you how to shut down a business and do it with dignity and do it in a way where you're not burning bridges. I didn't burn any
Okay.
bridges. I paid everybody out, and I negotiated the
Nice.
terms. I negotiated like a hawk, but I did it in a way that I didn't want to burn bridges. I didn't want to tarnish my reputation. I just let it out. I just wanted it out because I want to be with my kids for a long time. But there was nowhere where I could go to or I could turn to in order to know, how do you close a business? How do you terminate a lease without owing them everything? How do you terminate a franchise? How do you terminate an employee? How do you close a bank account? Don't tell the bank that you're closing the business before you're ready to close the business, because they will freeze your
Yeah.
bank accounts. I did not know this.
Freezing.
I'm trying to be so like forward, talking to my banker, talking to everybody.
Yep.
I'm like executing my personal guarantees, no problem. I'm trying to be like above board, and then all of a sudden like my banker freezes everything, and I was like, yo, like I'm paying you. And then I heard from people who have closed so many businesses, yeah, no, you don't tell the bank. I'm like, what do you mean what does that mean? Like, why? Okay,
Yeah,
because they
where were
would
you
freeze.
a while ago? Yeah.
Yeah, so I learned a lot. Now I know how to
Oh,
close a business, unfortunately,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's stuff that obviously they never teach you in school.
No kidding, right? Yeah, you're right. It is. The sexy part is the starting the business. How now we started it. Now we got to grow it and scale and all those fun things. They don't talk about the other side of the hill, coming back down and closing. You're right. That's funny. Wow. Such a great story, man. It's so many things going on. I love it all. But most of all, I love that you're really trying to help other people and that you're trying to connect people with resources that, you didn't have, your family didn't have when you guys immigrated to Canada. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I really hope that this pop-up retail business in the Broward market keeps being successful throughout the summer. I'll
Thank
have to
you.
pop in there for sure and see what's
Yeah,
new
you
each week
do.
and
It's
see what's
on
going on.
Byler Market and York
Yeah,
Street. So
Broward Market, New York Street. Perfect. Anyway, I'm going to thank you very much for your time, Karla, and I can't wait to see what you're up to next. So please stay in touch and let me know what's going on. Thank you so
I
much for
will.
your time.
Thanks for inviting me, Nick. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.